I've known him for 15 years. 15 years of conversations that drifted late into the night. 15 years of shared history, inside jokes, and unspoken understanding. And 15 years of trusting someone so deeply I never imagined he'd be the one to undo me. I'm gay. He's straight, at least. That's how our story was always framed. We met during our studies. And for a long time, our friendship was simple, comfortable, safe. He dated women, I lived my life, and there were clear boundaries between us. Or so I believed. About 3 or 4 years ago, something shifted. We grew closer than we ever had before. He wasn't just a friend anymore. He became my confidant. The person I told everything to. The person whose messages I checked. First when my phone buzzed, and slowly, almost jokingly, the tension crept in every night. Right before going to bed, he'd make this same kind of remark, always framed as humor, always with a laugh. Something suggestive, something I was supposed to brush off. At first I did, then I started fantasizing, and eventually I learned to live with it, because nothing ever happened. Years went by like that, this strange, fragile balance. A kind of bromance that hurt just enough to remind me it was there, but not enough to force me to walk away. I fantasized about him more times than I could count, but I learned to bury it and move on with my life. Until one night, everything broke open. We were staying together like we had so many times before. He made the same joke before bed. I smiled, rolled my eyes, and called him annoying, and I went upstairs like always. But that night, I left my phone on. I don't know why. Habit, maybe? Or hope I'd stopped admitting to myself. Then the message came. I'm not going to bed like this. My heart started racing before my mind could catch up. I told myself not to read into it. But my body already knew. I went back. Downstairs, he looked at me for a long moment, then asked quietly, almost nervously, "Do you think this would ruin our friendship?" I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that the tension had been building for years. And suddenly, it was impossible to ignore. What happened that night didn't feel reckless, didn't feel wrong, felt like something that had been waiting to happen, patiently, silently. There were no big words, no promises, just closeness, intensity, connection. It was one of the most powerful experiences of my life, and that's exactly what made it dangerous for him. It was new, confusing. Alcohol didn't help. He kept saying how unreal it felt, how crazy it was. I made sure constantly that he was okay, that he wanted this, okay, that we could stop anytime. He never wanted to stop, but I could feel his mind fighting his body. A few days later, it happened again. This time, more deliberate, more grounded. And afterward, for a brief moment, I let myself believe this could become something real. I was wrong. Almost immediately, he pulled away. He told me it didn't mean much to him, that it wasn't really for him, that it would never happen again. Over and over, as if repeating it enough times would make it true for both of us. He reestablished distance, physical, emotional, deliberate. And when I struggled with that, when my expectations slipped through the cracks, he wasn't always gentle. Sometimes he was cold, sometimes even harsh, as if I were the one who had crossed a line. I tried to understand. I tried to accept it, because losing him entirely felt worse than losing that part of him. From August to January, we saw each other dozens of times. Nothing happened. Slowly, painfully, I adjusted. I told myself I could live with friendship alone, 'cause he mattered too much to lose. And just when I thought I'd finally found some balance, life tested it again. This time we traveled to the mountains with his family. A small apartment, no privacy. We slept in the living room together. At first we were careful, almost stiff. It's as if touch itself had become dangerous. The bed was small, and avoiding contact took effort. When I tried to get comfortable, I told him it helped me sleep. He said it bothered him a bit, so I stopped. But night after night, without words, we ended up close again, back to back. Body to body. always at his initiative. On the last night, we talked quietly about the trip, about how good it had been. I told him I'd had an amazing time with everyone, and with him. We hugged. Just a few seconds. A simple gesture of affection, and then he said something that shattered the fragile peace we'd rebuilt, half joking, half warning. He said that if we went any further, things would get messy again. I pushed back, gently. I told him we could show affection without crossing lines. A few minutes later, I could feel him moving restlessly. His breathing changed. Then he whispered that he wanted to do it again. I should have said no, but I didn't. That night went further than ever before, further than I believed he'd ever allow himself to go, especially someone who works so hard to maintain a straight, masculine image. When it ended, I already knew the truth. Nothing had changed except me. Now I'm stuck in a loop I don't know how to escape. I know he can't give me more than this. I know this will never turn into a real relationship. And yet, every time I try to move on, every time I meet someone new, I want him more than anyone else. The unpredictability, the intensity, the connection we share, both intellectual and physical. It's intoxicating. I know his life plan. He wants to move to the other side of the world within the next 2 years. And I know what that means. An ending I'm not ready for. I want to be strong enough to let go. To move on. To build something healthy with someone who can choose me fully. But when I imagine a life without him, I feel empty, because the hardest part isn't that I love him. It's that I've tasted something rare. Now I don't know how to live without it, so I'm left with one question. How do you let go of someone who never fully chose you, when they're the only person who's ever made you feel this alive? What finally forced me to let go? Calmer voice, slower than part one, controlled emotion. I didn't let go all at once. People think there's a moment where you wake up and suddenly choose yourself, that you draw a clean line and move on. That's not how it happened for me. For a long time, I told myself I was being patient, understanding, mature. But the truth is, I was waiting for a sign, waiting for him to change, waiting for the version of him that only showed up in the dark to finally exist in the light. After that last night together, nothing was said, no conversation, no acknowledgement, no "You okay?" Just silence. And that silence did something to me. I noticed I was rearranging my entire life around someone who refused to meet me halfway. I was measuring my days by his moods, his distance, his availability. When he was warm, I felt alive. When he pulled away, I felt empty. And the worst part? He still got everything from me, my attention, my emotional support, my loyalty, while I got fragments. One night, I caught myself rehearsing conversations in my head. Not about us being together, but about how to make myself smaller so he wouldn't disappear again. That was the first crack. The second came when I realized something that hurt more than anything else. If he truly wanted me, I wouldn't be this confused. People who want you don't leave you guessing. They don't only choose you in secret. They don't make you feel like affection is a favor. I started seeing patterns I had refused to name. How intimacy only happened on his terms, how desire always had an expiration date, how every boundary protected him, never me. I wasn't his partner. I wasn't even his choice. I was his escape. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. The moment that finally broke me wasn't dramatic, it was ordinary. We were talking about his future, about moving abroad, starting over, building a life somewhere else. He was excited, hopeful, alive. I realized he had room in his plans for everything, except me. Not as a partner, not as someone he might lose, just as someone who would adapt. That night, I went home and did something I had avoided for years. I let myself grieve not just him, but the fantasy, the version of us that only ever existed in my head. I cried for the moments that felt real but weren't sustainable. for the connection that was intense but conditional, for the love I gave someone who could never return it fully. And then I made a decision, not a dramatic one, not a perfect one, a quiet one. I stopped initiating, no more late night messages, no more emotional availability on demand, no more being the safe place he could run to without consequence. At first, it felt unbearable. Withdrawal silence, the kind of emptiness that makes you question everything. But something unexpected happened. I started breathing again. I noticed how much energy I had been spending just hoping, how much of myself I had placed on pause. Letting go didn't mean I stopped loving him. It meant I stopped abandoning myself today. He's still part of my life, but differently, with distance, with boundaries, with clarity, and finally open to something else. Something steady, something mutual, something that doesn't hide. I don't regret loving him, but I regret how long. I convinced myself that half love was enough. If you're listening to this and you're stuck in something similar loving, someone who only chooses you when it's convenient, here, this. You're not asking for too much. You're just asking the wrong person. Letting go doesn't mean the connection wasn't real. It means you've finally decided that you are.